A 14-core human warship detonated. The stars themselves screamed HFY. The third time I wrote it, I let it be true. The first two versions are still on file, both accurate, both signed, both describing an event that happened the way I described it in the order I described it, with the numbers correct and the timestamps verified. I have read them back. Every word is defensible. Both of them are cowards. What I am writing now is the third version. It is not a formal report. It will not be filed through the Dominion's standard incident classification system. High Marshal Sothval will not sign it. I am writing it because the Pale Accord Conclave has been running for 11,000 years, and in 11,000 years no one has written down what I watched happen at Entry Corridor Verathnul. Someone should. The number is 318. That is how many capital ships the Voriki 3rd Expansion Command lost in 41 seconds. Not in a battle, in a sequence. The humans did not fight back. They had already finished. Stay close. The part that still keeps me up is this. She decided which ships would survive 6 years before they arrived. You need to hear how that happened. The tactical display is still on. That is the wrong detail. After 31 hours adrift, with the stabilizers offline and the floor listing 3 degrees to starboard and Sothval not having spoken since 6:22, no one has cleared the display. The ship position markers are still there. Blue-white dots on black, arranged in the standard annexation formation, showing the last known coordinates of 318 capital ships before contact was lost. They do not move. They do not blink. They are not ships anymore. They are a record. No warning had come, no signal we could read. No gap in the sequence long enough to act into. I am looking at the display now as I write this. I could clear it. I have not. I think I am waiting to understand what I am looking at before I make it disappear. The first impact registered at 6:21 hours and 14 seconds on the forward capital ship Doctrine Assured. The intercept platform that fired had been in position for 82 years. The Doctrine Assured had been in Voriki service for 11. There was no contest in those numbers. There was never going to be. By 6:21 and 55 seconds, 318 of our 340 capital ships were gone. The whole thing took 41 seconds. I will tell you about those 41 seconds later. First, I need to tell you about the 11 days before them, because the 41 seconds do not mean anything without the 11 days, or the 83 years, or the woman I had never heard of who made a decision 6 years ago in a classified file I am still not allowed to read. I will start with the room. 11 days before the engagement. Conclave Session 8847, the Pale Accord Chamber. The chamber was built inside a hollowed asteroid that had been designated neutral ground 9,000 years ago, before half the species in this session were old enough to have the concept of neutral ground. The walls are raw stone, unfinished, not because no one has gotten around to smoothing them. Smoothing them was considered an act of ownership, and ownership of the chamber is the one thing no one is allowed to claim. The walls have stayed rough for 9,000 years. You can catch your sleeve on them if you walk too close. The air smelled like ozone and something older. Incense, maybe, from some ceremony that happened before my grandfather's grandfather was born. The recyclers had been running long enough that they had stopped removing the smell and started being part of it. I breathed it in. I had processed 3 annexation filings in this chamber before. The smell was the same each time. I had the pre-vote summary on my screen. 4 pages. Standard margins, or almost standard. The margins were a little tighter than the template called for, which I noticed and did not note because it did not matter. The species name was different from the last filing. Everything else was the same. I did not think anything was about to happen. That is the most honest sentence in any version of this report. Up in the highest row, where the curved seats rose steep enough that the species at the top needed the amplification system to hear the species at the bottom, Elder Sarethven of the Fenori sat very still. She was the oldest delegate in the chamber. I do not know exactly how old. The Fenori do not publish those numbers, and the ones who live past 1,000 years tend to stop counting in ways that translate to other species' calendars. She was not reading anything. She was not speaking to the delegates on either side of her. She was watching the floor. I noticed her the way I noticed the tight margins quickly, without recording it because it did not seem to matter. She had not voted in any session I had processed. The Fenori are observers. It is their role. They watch. They advise when asked. They do not intervene in outcomes they have decided are not theirs to change. I filed Sarethven under noted, no action required. I was wrong about almost everything that day. That one I was wrong about in a particular way. The vote on the Voriki annexation of 4 outer boundary systems took 11 minutes. That was faster than average. I noted the speed in my first report as evidence of clear consensus. In the third report, I am not sure what to call it. Efficiency, maybe. The efficiency of an institution that had never successfully blocked a Voriki expansion action and had stopped expecting to try. The final count was 284 to 16. The 16 opposing votes came from species whose own territories bordered the outer boundary. Their objections were filed and entered into the record. They will stay in the record. Conclave records go back 6,000 years, maintained by the Methsarai Administrative Corps, and I have never heard of a filed objection changing an outcome after the fact. High Marshal Sothval was not in the chamber for the vote. He did not need to be. The Voriki expansion doctrine does not require the commanding officer to attend the authorization session. It requires them to be in position. He was already moving. I had been assigned to the inviolable claim for 6 years. 3rd Fleet, Expansion Command. I had processed 3 annexation filings from this desk. The desk is in a corner of the command deck with a clear line of sight to both the tactical display and Sothval's position at the center console, which was useful for my work and which I had stopped thinking about as a design choice. The inviolable claim is 2.4 kilometers long. The command deck is on the upper third, behind a viewport that looks out over the bow. When Sothval stood at the center console, which is where he always stood, he was framed by stars. I do not think he chose that positioning deliberately. I think he simply occupied the center of every room he entered because he was the kind of person who did not notice whether he was at the center or not. He was always at the center. He was standing there now, weight on his left leg, arms behind his back. That was his posture when he had already decided. I knew it the way you know the sound your ship makes when it is running normally. Background knowledge, not conscious. The capability assessment for the annexation target was on my screen. I had pulled it to cross-reference the annexation filing, standard procedure. 4 pages. The assessment used the word negligible 4 times in 4 different contexts. I noticed this because I had been trained to flag unusual word repetition in official documents. I flagged it internally. I did not escalate it. Negligible 4 times in 4 different contexts seemed like emphasis rather than error. I closed the assessment. I opened the formation chart. That was the last thing I did before the filing was complete, and we began the approach. Navigator Thros Velkar ran the approach to entry corridor Varathnul the same way he ran every approach. Both hands on the console, instruments checked twice in sequence, no variation. He had made this kind of run before on different targets. His efficiency was the efficiency of someone who has done something enough times that the act of doing it no longer requires thought. Fleet Coordinator Anath Sewer handled the broadcast. Before every transmission, he smoothed the edge of his display with 2 fingers, 1 slow pass. I had watched him do this 40 or 50 times. It was the kind of habit people develop without knowing they have it. Sewer did not know he did it. I had never mentioned it to him. At 6:01 hours, Sewer smoothed the edge of his display. Then he transmitted the standard annexation terms on open frequency. The message was in 4 languages: the 2 Voriki administrative dialects, the conclave standard, and the target species' primary registered tongue. The terms were the same terms used on the 7 prior species. They had been effective 7 times. We gave them 5 of their minutes to respond. No response came. No countersignal from Earth. No emergency channel open to the conclave. No mobilization order in any register the fleet could read. SciFi did not move. His weight was still on his left leg. He looked at the tactical display for a moment. Then he said quietly to no one in particular, consistent with assessment. In my first report, I wrote, consistent with Category 3 capability assessment, response absence interpreted as confirmation of projected outcome. In the third report, I wrote, he heard nothing because nothing he had was designed to hear what was already listening. I pulled the capability assessment again that night, after the approach was locked and the formation was set. I do not know why. Habit, maybe, or something that felt like the beginning of a question I had not finished asking myself yet. The assessment was 31 pages. It covered population, industrial output, registered fleet strength, conclave standing, prior engagement history. It was thorough in the way official documents are thorough. It accounted for everything it knew how to measure. I was cross-referencing the infrastructure section when I found it. The Veil Deep assessment is 291 pages long. It was classified at the time of filing and remains classified. I know it exists because it is listed in the conclave's outer administrative index, not the content, just the filing record. It was submitted 83 years ago by a human defense analyst whose name is redacted in the public index. It was filed in the same quarter as a waterline repair authorization for a maintenance facility on an outer moon. The conclave index links them alphabetically. 7 people read it. That number is in the index, not the names, just the number. The conclave had never cross-referenced the Veil Deep assessment with the capability report. I sat with that for a moment, then I kept reading. Here is what I found in the outer registry. The caretaker configuration. That is not the official name. That is the name in the classified index. Consisted of 14,000 fixed emplacements distributed across 3 orbital shells around the human system. It also included 220 unmanned intercept platforms, each 138 meters long, each one capable of independent targeting at ranges of 200,000 kilometers. Woven through the outer approach were 7,100 sensor nodes. Every single one of them was listed in the conclave's official outer system registry as passive navigation infrastructure, Category 7, decommissioned, non-operational, scheduled for removal. The maintenance cycle that would have removed them had been postponed 11 times across 8 decades. None of them were any of those things. I sat at my desk for a while after I found that. SciFi was at the center console. Velkar was running a pre-approach check. Sewer was reviewing the second broadcast text. I thought about the 7 people who had read 291 pages and then, apparently, built what those pages described. Over 83 years, across generations, in pieces that looked from the outside like nothing at all. I did not know what to do with that. So I did what I always do when I do not know what to do with something. I cross-referenced it. The outer registry listed the first emplacement as installed 83 years ago, the last as installed 14 months ago. The sensor node in the outermost position had been installed the year before I was born. I checked the archive footage from the Pale Accord chamber, looking for anything I had missed. I found Elder Sarathven's file. She had submitted one comment to the conclave floor in the prior 400 years, filed 80 years ago, 4 sessions after the Veil Deep assessment was submitted. It read, noted, this will not go the way the motion assumes. She had submitted it in response to a different Voriki expansion filing. A different species. That annexation went through on the same vote count as ours. The absorbed species is still administered under Voriki hierarchy today. Sorethven's comment was filed under administrative observation. No action had ever been taken on it. I found the archive footage of the Veil Deep command node. It was listed in registry records as a water reclamation facility on a moon designated for infrastructure use in the outer system. In the archive footage, it looks exactly like that. Single-story buildings, pipes, a processing station, 40 or 50 personnel moving between structures in the kind of efficiency that does not look like anything other than routine maintenance work. One of the people in the footage is standing at an exterior console, silver-gray hair, worn short, no insignia on her uniform. She has one hand resting on something on the console surface, something small, and she is very still in the way that some people are still, not distracted, not absent but specifically located, as if they have decided exactly where they are and see no reason to be anywhere else. I could not identify the object on the console from the footage angle. It was about 60 centimeters long, brass-colored. She was not looking at it. Her hand was just resting there, the way people rest a hand on something they have had for a long time. She kept the sighting rod on the left side of her console, where she could reach it without looking. I learned later that the person who laid the first emplacement had carried it for 11 years before passing it on. It changed hands 3 more times after that, each time without ceremony, each time to the person who would need it next. Admiral Sareth Dunkaz had inherited it without being asked. The targeting sequence had been designed around Sothval's formation geometry, 81 years before Sothval was given his first command. I found this in the timing logs. Standard reconstruction work, matching impact timestamps to platform position records, the kind of thing you do after any engagement to build the official sequence of events. I was doing it by habit. I had done it after each of the 3 prior annexations I had processed, and those had gone the other way, and the reconstruction had been simple. Fleet approached, species offered token response or none, absorption proceeded. This reconstruction did not go that way. The intercept platforms had pre-assigned targets, not assigned when the fleet crossed the boundary, not assigned when Dunkaz entered the activation sequence, assigned before, long before. The platform that destroyed the doctrine assured had been holding that specific targeting solution for a time period. I kept checking, because I kept thinking I was reading it wrong. 81 years. Sothval was 44 years old. He had received his first command at 26. The platform was already holding his fleet's formation geometry 17 years before he sat down at his first command console. I left the categorization field on the reconstruction form blank. The form has a field for preemptive defense posture. It has a field for automated response systems. It has a field for non-standard engagement architecture. None of those fields fit what I was looking at. The form was not built to hold this. I do not think any form is. At 6:14 hours, 3 days after the conclave vote, Sothval gave the approach order. Entry corridor Varathnal looked like every other outer boundary approach on the charts. A wide vector, clear of major debris fields, running roughly perpendicular to the outer orbital shell. The sensor buoys along the outer edge were listed in the conclave registry as decommissioned navigation markers from an earlier era. Old equipment, scheduled for removal, left in place by inertia and budget cycles. Velkar had mapped the approach himself, using the public registry data. He had noted the old buoys in his navigation log and marked them as non-factors. He checked his instruments twice. He did not find anything wrong. None of the buoys were decommissioned. All of them had been watching entry corridor Varathnal for 82 years. The inviolable claim crossed the outer threshold at 6:14 hours and 33 seconds. Sothval was at the center console. Velkar was at navigation. Sewer was at broadcast. I was at my desk in the corner, the reconstruction form open on one screen and the approach chart on the other. The outer buoys logged our crossing. I know this because I found it later in the sensor archive data that came out in the Conclave review. The log timestamp is 061433. The entry is 3 characters, VEK, Verath Null Entry, Korath Class Fleet, a field that had been waiting 82 years for something to log. It logged it, then it passed the data inward. Sothval transmitted the first annexation notice at 6:18 hours. His voice on the broadcast was the same voice he used in command briefings and conclave sessions and conversations in the corridor, even, unhurried, carrying the specific weight of a person who has never needed to raise it to be heard. The terms were standard: 4 languages, 5 minutes to respond. I had heard him give this broadcast before, over recordings of the 3 prior annexations. The words were exactly the same. That was by design. The Voriki expansion doctrine values procedural consistency as a form of authority. Deviation from the standard terms would imply uncertainty about the outcome. There was to be no uncertainty. The 5 minutes passed. No signal came back. Sothval stood at the center console with his weight on his left leg and his arms behind his back. His exoskeletal shoulder ridge was still. The crest had not flattened. This was, in his read of the situation, going exactly as expected. Sewer smoothed the edge of his display. 2 fingers, 1 pass. He was preparing the second broadcast. Velkar was running a final instrument check before the formation entry order. He checked the outer sensor returns. He found nothing. The decommissioned buoys did not show up on active scans because they were not broadcasting. They were only listening. There was no mobilization signal from Earth. There was no emergency contact with the conclave. There was no counteroffer, no request for negotiation, no acknowledgement in any channel. He had never heard a species answer an ultimatum by simply having already answered it. None of us had. On a moon registered in conclave records as an infrastructure support facility, in a building whose exterior looked exactly like a water processing station, because it had been designed to look exactly like that, Admiral Sereth Dunkaz was at her console. She had been at that console, or one like it, for 29 years. Her staff was quiet. They had been ready for this for a long time, or rather, they had been ready for whoever came for a long time, and today it happened to be the Voriki. The console showed the outer sensor returns. The outer buoys were feeding data. The inviolable claim and its fleet were in standard annexation formation. 340 capital ships in the geometry the Voriki had used on 7 prior species. The geometry every platform in the caretaker configuration had been holding targeting solutions against since before some of the platform's technical staff had been born. Dunkaz picked up the sighting rod, not to use it, the same way she always picked it up, resting it across one palm for a moment, the worn calibration wheel under her thumb, the etched coordinates of the first emplacement facing up. The way some people breathe slowly before doing something they have been waiting a long time to do. She set it back down. Then she entered the 11-digit activation sequence. Across the outer system, 14,000 apertures opened. Not fast, not slow. At the pace of a mechanism completing a sequence it had been designed to complete, each aperture opening in the order its installation record specified, the way a door opens when someone finally turns the key. The 220 intercept platforms came to active targeting status. Each one already knew its assigned ship. Each one had known for longer than the ships had existed. The targeting solutions did not need to be calculated. They had been calculated, filed, maintained, updated as Voriki fleet geometry evolved over 8 decades, updated quietly, updated without announcement. Sothval transmitted the final notice at 6:20 hours. You are now inside the administrative boundary of the Voriki expansion doctrine. Stand aside or be catalogued. Sewer transmitted it cleanly. He smoothed the edge of the display first. Sothval's crest had still not moved. There was nothing on any display to move it. At 6:21 hours and 11 seconds, Velkar said very quietly, "Something is reading us." That was the last sentence anyone spoke on the command deck for 41 seconds. I will tell you what 41 seconds sounds like from inside it. It sounds like a system working. 0621-14. First impact registered on the doctrine assured. The hit came through the deck plating before it came through the display, a vibration, not sharp, just wrong, the way a sound is wrong when it comes from a direction that has no business making sounds. The display updated 2 seconds later. One blue-white marker went dark. Velkar reached for his console. His hands found the controls. The controls had no procedure for this. He kept his hands there anyway. At 0621-22, we had lost contact with 90 capital ships. At 0621-29, it was 190. The targeting waves were overlapping. Each platform completed its assignment, and the next began before the gap in the data was wide enough to read as a pattern. There was no gap long enough to act into. No 2-second window where someone could have said stop or wait or we surrender. The sequence did not have a pause function. It had been designed by people who understood that if you give a Voriki fleet 2 seconds of gap, those 2 seconds get used. At 0621-44, it was 280. Sothval had not moved. His crest was flat against his skull. That was the stress response. I had seen it once before, during a border reversal 3 years ago, when an allied species had unexpectedly withdrawn support at the last moment, and the formation had to change under fire. He had looked then like a man absorbing a surprise and already reorganizing around it. He did not look like that now. He looked like a man trying to find a category, and discovering the category did not exist. There was no anger, no command posture, no reading of a situation to be done. His head had turned slightly toward the display, and his weight was still on his left leg, and the exoskeletal plating on his shoulders had not shifted position since 0621-11, and he was looking at something that his entire life's framework had not built him to see. No protocol, no fallback, no word for what was happening. At 0621-55, 318 of 340 capital ships, all 80 support vessels. The ground deployment craft were not touched. I did not know why. I would not know why for 31 hours. The inviolable claim was disabled at 0621-51. The main drive cut. The stabilizers went offline. The floor began its slow list to starboard, 3 degrees, the kind of list that makes you think the room is wrong before you understand what is happening to the ship. Sewer's hand was still on the edge of his display, the second finger. He had not finished the pass. Velkar was still holding his console with both hands. His instruments were showing nothing he knew how to act on. The engagement lasted 41 seconds. The preparation that produced it lasted 83 years. At 6:22 hours, Admiral Sareth Dunkaz transmitted on the same open frequency Sothval had used for the annexation notice. Her message was 7 words. In my first report, I noted the transmission and recorded its content as classified, pending review authorization. In my second report, I noted the same thing. In the third report, I wrote the words, "They do not require a category. They do not fit in a field." I wrote them in the margin, outside the official form, in smaller print than everything above them. You were warned 83 years ago. Sareth then submitted a second comment to the conclave floor at 11:04 hours the following morning, her first in 80 years. I do not know what it said. I was not authorized to access it during the 31 hours we were drifting. I obtained a copy 3 days later in the recovery facility, and I read it twice. I did not include it in the report. It was not mine to include. But here is what kept me awake that night, and the night after, and most of the nights since. The ground deployment craft survived because a woman I had never heard of decided 6 years ago, in a classified operational note I still cannot read, exactly which ships would live and which would not. Not because she ran out of platforms, not because she made a mistake, because she planned for the aftermath as carefully as she planned for the engagement. She needed someone to file the incident report. She knew 6 years ago that there would be one. She chose who? SciFi did not speak during the 31 hours we drifted. Not to me, not to Velkar, not to Sewer, who sat at his broadcast console with his hands in his lap and did not transmit anything, because there was no one to transmit to and no words that fit the transmission format. 3 months after the engagement, the Pale Accord Conclave opened a formal review of Outer System Capability Assessment procedures. The review was expected to take 4 years. I noted this in the report without comment. SciFi signed it. He was required to. Standard procedure for the senior surviving officer. He cannot delegate it. I watched him sign it. His face was the same face he had worn at the center console when his crest went flat. He is not in prison. He has not been discharged. He is in his office, in a building in the administrative district of the Dominion's capital, where he goes every day and sits behind a desk that is not on a ship and does work I do not have visibility into. He has to get up every morning and continue. That is his fate. I do not know what to call it. The form does not have a field for it. Sorethven watched, Dunkaz built, Fenris wrote, only one of those things would last. The review will take 4 years if it takes what they say it will take. The conclave records go back 6,000 years, and the Methsarai will maintain what I file the same way they maintain everything, carefully, indefinitely, in stone that no one is allowed to smooth. The third report is filed now. I have one note left to add, outside the official margins. I wrote it yesterday, when I found the footage of the water reclamation facility for the 3rd time and saw Dunkaz standing at the exterior console with her hand resting on the small brass instrument. I still do not know what it is. I asked twice and was told twice that it was not relevant to the report. So I wrote it the only way I knew how. A small brass instrument, worn at one end, 60 centimeters, carried for 83 years by people who were doing something that would take longer than any one of them would live to see finished. The tactical display is still on. The blue-white markers have not moved. Outside the viewport, entry corridor Varathnal is dark and still. The old sensor buoys sitting quiet in the same positions they have held for 8 decades, listening to nothing now, having done the one thing they were built to do. The third report signed, 7 words in the margin outside the form. The rod resting on the left side of a console, in reach, worn smooth at one end. The coordinates of the first emplacement etched along its face in letters too small to read from across the room.